The conversation seemed normal at first, but within seconds, the energy in the studio shifted so sharply that even the audience could feel it. You could see it on Harrison Ford's face, that tight jaw, the slow blink, the look of someone trying very hard to stay patient. Quick heads up, subscribe to Backstory Uncovered, because what starts as a normal conversation here is about to take a turn no one expected. The cameras were already rolling as the discussion moved into Ford's latest project and his decades-long career. Whoopi Goldberg sat across from him at the table, leaning forward with interest, the audience quietly attentive. "So Harrison," Whoopi began, smiling slightly, "you've played some of the most iconic roles in film history. But people still talk about your, let's say, complicated relationship with Hollywood." A few audience members chuckled softly. Ford nodded once. "Complicated is one way to put it." His tone was calm, but reserved. Whoopi tilted her head. "Some critics say you've always kept a distance from the industry. From the press, too." Ford shrugged lightly. "I've always preferred doing the work rather than talking about it." Another small ripple of laughter moved through the audience. Whoopi continued. "But don't you think that distance sometimes comes across as dismissive?" There was a tiny pause. Ford looked directly at her. "Dismissive," he repeated. "Yeah," Whoopi said, still smiling but clearly probing. "Some people feel like you don't engage unless it's on your terms." A few murmurs rose from the audience. Ford leaned back slightly in his chair. "Well," he said slowly, "most conversations should be on honest terms." The room grew a little quieter. Whoopi folded her hands. "Fair enough. But fans also want access. They want to feel like the stars they admire actually want to talk to them." Ford nodded again, but this time the nod felt tighter. "I've spent 50 years showing up to sets at 5 in the morning," he said. "I've given interviews. I've answered questions." He paused. "I think that counts as engaging." A few audience members clapped lightly. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. "Sure. But you've also been known to shut down interviews when the questions get uncomfortable." Ford's expression changed just slightly. "Depends on the question," he replied. The audience could sense the shift now. Whoopi leaned forward again. "Okay, let's talk about that then." Ford's eyes narrowed a fraction. "What exactly do you mean?" "Well," Whoopi said, her voice calm but firm, "there's a reputation that if someone pushes a little too far, you get impatient." Some laughter from the crowd. Ford didn't laugh. Instead, he sat still for a moment, staring at the table before looking back up. "I get impatient when conversations stop being conversations," he said. The audience quieted again. Whoopi tilted her head slightly. "Meaning?" "Meaning when questions are asked just to create a headline," Ford replied. A few audible "ohs" came from the audience. Whoopi smiled, but there was tension in it now. "Well, this is television, Harrison," she said. "Headlines kind of come with the territory." Ford let out a slow breath. "Yes," he said. "They do." For a second, the studio was silent. Then Whoopi leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "So are you saying this show asks those kinds of questions?" The audience immediately reacted, a mix of gasps and nervous laughter. Ford didn't answer right away. He simply looked at her. The pause stretched long enough that people started shifting in their seats. Finally he spoke. "I'm saying," Ford said carefully, "sometimes the tone of a question matters more than the question itself." Whoopi raised her eyebrows again. "And you think my tone is off?" Ford looked straight at her. "I think," he said slowly, "you already know the answer to that." The audience erupted in murmurs. Whoopi blinked once, clearly surprised by how direct the moment had become. "Well," she said after a brief pause, "this just got interesting." Ford didn't smile. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. "Only if we're actually being honest," he said. And suddenly the entire atmosphere in the studio felt completely different. For a few seconds after Harrison Ford said that, the studio felt unusually quiet. Whoopi Goldberg leaned back slightly in her chair, studying him. The audience was murmuring now, the kind of low reaction that happens when everyone realizes a conversation has just crossed into uncomfortable territory. "Well," Whoopi said slowly, Since you brought up honesty, let's talk about it. Ford nodded once, but his expression stayed firm. All right. Whoopi folded her hands on the table. You've built this reputation, she said, as someone who doesn't have a lot of patience for interviews. People say you shut things down when they get too personal. A few audience members shifted in their seats. Ford looked directly at her. That depends on what you call personal. Whoopi didn't hesitate. I mean questions about your career decisions, your frustrations with Hollywood, things you've said in the past about not liking the publicity side of this job. Ford exhaled slowly. I've said I don't enjoy the circus around it, he replied. Right, Whoopi said. But the circus is part of the deal, isn't it? That comment triggered a small wave of applause from parts of the audience. Ford glanced briefly toward the crowd, then back at Whoopi. Yes, he said. But there's a difference between promotion and provocation. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. Provocation. Ford leaned forward slightly. When someone keeps pushing the same angle, he said calmly, it stops being curiosity and starts being something else. The audience reacted again, a mix of quiet laughs and whispers. Whoopi tilted her head. So you think I'm pushing? Ford didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rubbed his hands together for a second, as if deciding how much to say. Then he spoke. I think you're trying to get a reaction. A few people in the audience gasped. Whoopi blinked, clearly caught off guard by the bluntness. Well, this is a talk show, she said with a small laugh. Ford didn't laugh. Sure, he replied. But it's also supposed to be a conversation. The room went quiet again. Whoopi leaned forward now, her tone sharpening slightly. Harrison, people watch shows like this because they want real answers. And I'm giving them, Ford said. But you're also pushing back on the questions, Whoopi replied. Ford's jaw tightened. I push back when questions assume something that isn't true. The tension was thick now. Even the audience had stopped reacting. Whoopi studied him for a moment before speaking again. So what's not true? Ford looked straight at her. That I'm some grumpy actor who hates talking to people. A few audience members laughed nervously. Ford continued. I've spent decades working with crews, directors, reporters, fans, thousands of conversations. He paused. But every once in a while, he added, someone decides the story is that I'm difficult. Whoopi opened her mouth to respond, but Ford kept going. And then every interview becomes about proving that story. That line triggered a noticeable reaction from the audience. Whoopi leaned back again, taking a breath. You know what? She said after a moment. That's actually fair. The shift surprised the audience. Ford blinked slightly. Whoopi nodded. Sometimes media does lock onto a narrative, she admitted. Once it sticks, it follows you everywhere. A few people clapped. Ford's expression softened just a little. But, Whoopi added quickly, raising a finger, you also can't blame people for wanting to see what's behind the legend. That brought a small smile to Ford's face for the first time. Well, he said dryly, behind the legend is a guy who woke up early to be here today. The audience burst into laughter. The tension finally cracked. Even Whoopi laughed. All right, she said, shaking her head. Fair enough. Ford leaned back in his chair. For a moment, the conversation relaxed again. But you could still feel the intensity that had just passed through the room. Whoopi glanced at the audience. I'll say this, she added. You definitely didn't hold back today. Ford shrugged. You asked. The audience laughed again. Whoopi smiled and looked toward the camera. And that, she said, is why live television keeps things interesting. Ford gave a small nod. The crowd applauded as the moment settled. But the exchange had clearly left an impression, the kind of tense, unscripted moment people would be talking about long after the show ended. So what do you think? Did Harrison Ford have a point about how interviews sometimes push for reactions? Or was Whoopi just doing her job as a host? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Backstory Uncovered for more moments like this.